All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you may be joining us from. My name is Roger Snyder. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at 280 Group, and you've joined our Ask Me Anything panel series. This month, in honor of International Women's Month, we are focusing on unleashing your leadership potential as a woman in product management. We want this to be a lively conversation today, so we encourage questions. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, please type it into the chat box. And we're going to kind of alternate between the questions that we received for folks who, as they registered, entered a question, and the questions that we see live. So we'll be going back and forth over the course of the panel. And let me introduce our panel today. I'm very happy to be joined by Brandye Sweetnam, Director of Product from Netflix, Robyn Brooks, Associate Strategic Advisor and Trainer from 280 Group, and Cynthia Williamson, Senior Vice President of Product Management from Jamf. And I would encourage each panelist to introduce themselves. Brandye, tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure, happy to. Hello, everyone. My name is Brandye Sweetnam. I'm currently Director of Product for Partner Enablement at Netflix. Prior to that, I spent many years in fintech, most recently at PayPal. I have always been interested in working with partners in the B2B to C and enterprise space. And so I'm excited to take on the new challenge at Netflix. It's been 9 months, 100% remote. So I know that wasn't covered in any of the questions, but people have questions about onboarding remote. I'm happy to answer those as we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Brandye. Thanks for joining us. Cynthia.
Well, thank you for having me on the panel today, Roger. A little bit of background. After many years of working in a variety of roles in software, I was recruited by BCG back in 2016 and really had the opportunity to refocus my career on product management, and it is my passion. In that role, I was supporting more than 50 companies in product management. It was a tremendous experience. During that time, I got exposed to one of their companies called Jamf. It was just a fantastic culture, great products, wonderful opportunity for me to truly return to what I love to do, being an operator. So I joined them in November of 2019. Much like Brandye, most of the time I've been with them, I've been remote due to COVID, but it's been a wonderful ride so far.
Thank you for joining us, Cynthia. And Robyn, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, I'm Robyn Brooks. I have spent most of my product career in education technology. In fact, I came to product management from education. I was a high school teacher in a world that was very female dominated, and now I moved into technology and product management and transitioned into a much more male dominated culture. And it was a fascinating transition. So I'm excited to talk to you all about that today.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us today, Robyn. All right. So like I said before, I encourage folks to enter questions in the chat box as we are going forward. We are going to start with a few of the questions that were entered during the registration process. And the first question came from Melina, who is a product manager in the insurance industry. And she asked, what are some of the most common challenges as a woman in product in the workplace? And Brandye, maybe you can kick us off on this topic.
Sure, happy to. I think there are many challenges that women face. There's women in general, and then there's also mothers, which is a subset, of course. I would say one of the biggest challenges that women across the board face is when we are presenting and pitching our ideas, then having them repeated back to us as though they were someone else's ideas. And while that's a great influential tactic, it also diminishes our value and diminishes the value that we bring to the conversation. And so one tip that I can provide there is to just respond with, well, I'm glad you agree with me. I take your comments as violent agreement in what I said and turn it back to make sure that everybody knows that it was your idea to begin with.
Great point. Do others want to weigh in? There's probably many challenges, but each of you could probably give us one.
Sure, I'll jump in, Roger. I think, over the course of my career, lots of challenges. I think the one that I found the most difficult, however, was advocating for myself. And I think kind of as an extension of that, when I think about career path opportunities and jobs that would become available that were more senior than the role I was in, I was really hesitant to take a chance on myself. And a lot of women, I think, face that. Some of the studies I've read over the years say things like men may apply if they don't check all the boxes, but we as women feel like we really need to check all the boxes. So I guess kind of as a tip, like Brandye says, really put yourself out there, even if you don't check all the boxes, and really have faith that you are able to take that next step in your career.
Great point. Yeah, so a little more confidence. And Robyn?
Yeah, I think for me, to kind of piggyback on a lot of what Brandye and Cynthia have experienced, it's combating stereotypes. There are definitely a lot of stereotypes around men are like this, women are like this, and sometimes you don't fit the mold, and that's okay.
Mhm.
So lean into that, embrace your individuality as a woman in product.
Great. Thank you, Robyn. And actually, dovetailing to Cynthia's point earlier in terms of self-advocacy, the next question that I noticed from the registration list was from Daria, who is a product manager as well. And she asked, how can you advocate for promotions and senior roles in a flat team structure? Brandye, you want to kick us off on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So those who are familiar with Netflix, it's a very flat structure. There's, I think, 3 levels total. And what I have found, and I came from, just in history, I came from a company that had multiple levels within each job title. It was very confusing. And what I have found that despite the fact that it's flat, there's still very strong differentiation within each level. And so as you look to grow and want to achieve that next level, even if there's only 1 or 2 in your organization, think about how to differentiate yourself within your existing level. So look for opportunities to take on more, to mentor people, to be more strategic. Ask for help from your manager, seek out sponsors in the organization, and expand your network so that people know who you are. When an opening does come up, your name is on the tip of the lips.
And Brandye, when you say take on more, do you mean things like special projects or tiger teams, that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Let me be clear. I do mean special projects, mentoring, leading projects. I do not mean becoming the office administrator or taking on planning social events, which women are generally always the ones to first raise their hands. That's not what I mean. I mean focused on the work and the strategy. See where you can lean in and use your expertise to grow others.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Do others have things they want to throw in on that? All right. So moving on to the next question, which is related, how do you advance in a product role when your direct supervisor doesn't understand product management? Cynthia, you want to start us off on that one?
You bet. I think, because I've been in the industry so long, product management has just evolved a lot, right? I think it's a really exciting place for us as women to be right now. I've definitely had this over the years in my own experience, and I've tried to step back from it and think, we're working in a company that's producing software, and at the end of the day, we all are driven to really engage and ensure we can drive the commercial success of the products in some way. So what I've done, a couple of things that have kind of worked for me, I've stepped back and thought about, okay, how can I speak in a common language? So sometimes in product, we get caught in our own acronyms and our own processes very, very deeply, and we're passionate about them. But really looking at how do I bubble that up in a way that speaks to my supervisor so that he can understand what it is I want to share with him. And I use that common denominator, things like how the work I'm doing is contributing to the company goals. So how are we impacting retention for the products? How are we driving sales? Those types of things. And then what I do is I take that opportunity to sneak in some education as I go. So not just talking about, the high points of what it is we're doing that is linking to those goals, but maybe a little bit of background of how we got there. And over a period of time, that subtly weaving in this educational component has worked really, really well for me. The other just quick thing that I've done and been thoughtful about is that if you have a supervisor that just doesn't understand, I step back again and I say, I'm going to set up one-on-ones if they're not set up already. And I'm going to think about talking about the progress that I'm making with my team using a framework that maybe steps through the functions or sub-functions within product management. So I begin to map out the update that I'm providing and map it back to those functional areas. And again, it's all about education. Sometimes the supervisor might not want to ask, right? They may feel uncomfortable asking you to explain what you do. So I create that environment where we're sharing it together and I'm proactively educating.
I like that. That's great. So you're both elevating their knowledge in that area as well as demonstrating your own expertise because you understand that discipline so well.
Exactly. And it's also a great opportunity, Roger. I get great insight and feedback back when I do that, things I didn't even think about because it's a fresh perspective. So it's really a win-win for both of us.
That's great. Robyn or Brandye, you want to add anything to that one? No? All right. So another question that I want to ask in this category was from Harmeet Gill, who is a senior product manager in networking technologies. What are key skills to demonstrate as an experienced IC, individual contributor, if you're targeting to become a manager or manager in a large company? Anyone want to take that one? I know throwing that one as a little curveball there, but go for it.
Sure, I think I can jump in, Roger, here. So I think when I first saw the list of questions, this is probably the question I get asked most at this point in my life when I meet with other females that are in PM. I can tell you from experience that transition for me and for a lot of the people that I've grown up with in product management as women has been one of the most challenging, I think, of our careers to make. It's really tricky, I think, to go from focusing so much of your effort on being truly an expert with specialized skills and knowledge as an IC, and then all of a sudden making this pivot to begin to try to get ourselves into a position where we're really going to place more emphasis and value on our ability to lead a team to deliver the results, right? It's tricky. So as an IC, one of the things that I often do is I'll say to people, put yourself in a position where you don't have the title necessarily, but you begin to act in a way as a leader to demonstrate that you belong in that job. So often when I'm having these discussions, I say, kind of step back and figure out, look at your team meetings and say, can I lead more discussions in the team meetings? Can I take an opportunity to mentor new employees? Because it's a great way to showcase, how you will behave as a leader managing a team. I also will say often, be really thoughtful about putting your hand up to lead new projects or come to the table with brand new ideas and not just the idea, but, at least an initial plan for how you would propose we could execute on them and then maybe offer to be that executor. So I think those types of things help you stand out, but you have the added bonus that if you do get in the position, you have some experience doing these things that will certainly provide a great foundation for you when you get to that next level.
Great advice. Yeah, I agree that it's been my advice as well for folks who wanted to move up into a leadership role. Demonstrate, as you were saying, like leading the product weekly team, right? If you have a product core team that you're getting together and you're the product manager there, step up. Sometimes a project manager might lead that team, but if you feel comfortable doing it as a product manager, you lead that team, you drive the agenda. And that is demonstrating your ability to be able to organize a group of folks and get them moving in a common direction. So great advice. Appreciate that. So a related question, I'm going to bounce back and forth now between questions that we got beforehand and questions we're seeing come in. And I encourage folks to keep putting their questions in. I may not be able to keep up, but Diana asked, how does a female PM navigate leading a dev team of men? Is coding knowledge a prereq? And I asked that because we were talking about IC skills. Does this help create a sense of respect for the product manager? Robyn, you want to answer this one?
I can take this one. I laugh because this is one of the first things I did as a product manager, coming from a background of being a high school teacher and having no coding experience whatsoever. And I did find that just self-teaching a little bit, I can probably get through enough JavaScript and Python to be kind of adorable to an actual engineer. But it was useful. And mostly from the perspective of being able to understand and empathize with the team. And then I was able to earn their respect. But then also beyond just coding knowledge, which they have, and I'm never going to compete with,
Right.
Bringing the domain knowledge, bringing product expertise, bringing that voice of the customer that the development team really actually needs in order to be able to do their jobs effectively. I was able to build mutual respect with all of the dev teams I've worked at, whether they were male dominated or a mixture or even female dominated. That's really the role that we play on the team. And so lean into that, live into that, and you're going to be successful.
Excellent. Brandye or Cynthia, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, similar to Robyn, one of the first core product roles I had was leading a very technical product with some very senior engineers, and it was a very old code base. So I had very little hope of understanding it because part of the problem was that it was too complex to maintain, and we were migrating. What I found worked really well was showing curiosity and just asking questions. These people, when they're recognized as being the experts in their domain, they're happy to share knowledge with you and to help explain it. And then if you have the ability to understand it at the technical level, that makes you even more powerful when you have to go and relay that and translate it to business. And being able to do that bi-directional communication between business and technology is really the sweet spot and the power of product managers.
Now, I'll just add here as well, similar to Robyn, I also went, and I this will date me a bit, but my first project was a COBOL project, and I didn't understand, much like Brandye. And I went to school at night, I learned C++, and it did a couple of things. I think that I would sit in the lunchroom and work on my simulations to do elevators and other things, and the developers would come in. I think they thought it was cute. And I also think, though, that they very much respected that I had an interest in better understanding what they did. And I'm not a good programmer, but I can tell you that doing that foundationally in my career has really, I think, provided me with an opportunity to better communicate with my engineering counterparts and better empathize with some of the challenges that they had. So I'm really glad I did it.
Excellent. Yeah, great example. If you demonstrate some curiosity, and I have given this advice to male and female product managers who worked for me in the past, who didn't have a technical background, demonstrate a curiosity, because I had a product manager who came from sales, right? And he had no technical background whatsoever, but he demonstrated enough curiosity, did a little bit of Googling and reading, and just kept asking lots of questions. And that definitely was helpful to create a stronger relationship with a technical crowd. Good. So several questions have come in, and we had this question come in as well from one of the pre-entered questions about microaggressions. Erica said, I have coding experience and have been fighting misogynistic microaggressions from male devs. It would be great to hear what strategies the panelists have to handle those microaggressions. Anybody want to? Yeah.
I can take a stab at it, and really, I don't think I'm an expert by any means, but I can share what I do. When I feel those microaggressions, I call them out, and I do it in a humorous way, somewhat to make a joke of it, so that it disarms the situation, but also helps to point out what happened. I do this also when people talk over me or interrupt me. It's the same thing. I'm the one that's known to go, I wasn't done yet. Thank you. Let me finish. And just subtle things like that, people learn really quickly when they're called out, as nicely and as humorously as possible, but they do learn.
Great point. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, I agree completely with what Brandye said. Try to handle it within the team if you can. Try to handle it in the room directly with the person that you're having the problem with, or group of people. But if you find that you're in a position that starts to feel really toxic, don't hesitate to go to your leadership or to HR, because that's how this kind of thing can manifest and start to metastasize throughout an organization. So defend yourself. Own up to the person that you're talking to that this is not okay with you. But if it continues, I think there's just such a pattern of us just kind of, melting into the shadows and trying to pretend like it's going to go away when it doesn't. So figure out when it crosses the line and take the action you need to take to protect yourself.
Good point. I also think that I'm going to speak up a little bit as an ally and I want to encourage the guys who are dialed in today who want to support their female coworkers, that we as allies should also speak up when we see something going on that we feel like is a microaggression, or feel like there's something happening here, male or female, where someone feels like they're, like I used to have an introvert on our team, and that introvert, she was always thinking in the background. And I learned as an extrovert that I wanted to get the introverts on my team to participate more. And I didn't want to talk over them. So I would encourage them to speak up and ask them questions. And then when they had thought through things and wanted to speak up, then I was really paying close attention to preventing someone else from interrupting that person when they did speak up, because it took a lot of courage on their part. And this is an introvert extrovert thing, right? So different dimension, but the same idea in terms of you want people's great ideas to be heard. And so male or female also, if you can ally with others at a team meeting or or a stand-up, wherever it may be, and when somebody seems to be getting overridden a little bit, it's like, wait, I want to go back and ask Brandye to expand on what she was talking about before she was interrupted. And notice how I threw that in there at the end. I first put the positive, like, I want to hear more. And then at the end, I subtly said, before she was interrupted. So I'm also calling out, but carefully calling out the person who did the interrupting in the first place. The emphasis is on get the good idea, but then the last part is still also putting a little bit of that other person on notice for what their behavior was. And so look for opportunities to support your coworkers. And again, introvert, extrovert, male, female, look for opportunities to support your coworkers so that they are heard, and that those microaggressions are held back a little bit. And to Robyn's point, talk to a supervisor, talk to HR, or talk to that other, if you have the courage, take that person aside and coach them a little bit one-on-one. If you feel comfortable doing that, I would encourage that as a first step, because that also gives that person opportunity to maybe not even notice that they were doing this, right? I was called out once, and I'm a father of 4 girls, so I'm very passionate about equity in the workplace. But I was doing something that I didn't realize until someone pulled me aside and said, do you realize that you're interrupting a lot? And as an extrovert, that kind of just happens for me. And so it wasn't until someone pulled me aside and told me that that's what I was doing that I was then much more aware of how I was behaving. So if you feel comfortable, I would encourage you, if you can, pull the person. Don't do it in a meeting necessarily. I like Brandye's suggestion of subtle ways to do it using humor. But if you can, if it's a repetitive pattern, pull that person aside one-on-one and just, hey, and start with a positive. And you can use humor there as well. Be like, hey, I'm really trying to get my ideas out there. I would love your support. And even appeal to their ego a little bit of, you're really sharp. I would love your support if you would support me more and interrupt me less, right? So that also gives a what's in it for me spin on getting their support as you are working to more self-advocate. All right, lots of more questions coming in. Let's see here. I think I'm gonna go to, I want to switch over into the kind of breaking into leadership category of questions, because we received a lot of those. We talked a little bit about what IC skills to demonstrate. So, but how do you show, we had a question from Angela that was along the same lines of, what other key skills do you need to show to progress from product manager to director? And this is specifically moving up into like a director role. And Brandye, you want to kick us off on that one?
Absolutely. So it's similar to Cynthia's response to how do you grow from IC to leadership and into manager of managers. Going from a senior PM role or lead PM to director is one of those, step function changes in someone's career. And so it is a question I get very often. I would say what's important is to demonstrate that you can operate, first of all, at that director level, but more so understand your product, your pillar, your portfolio, and how it relates to the overall business. So as a director, you're generally in charge of multiple lines of business or multiple product pillars, multiple features, but understanding how your current situation relates to the overall business, how you can amplify the impact of your product by partnering with others and really building that story around the comprehensive suite of tools and products that you own and that your team owns. helps to raise awareness that you are thinking strategically, you're thinking beyond just your own wheelhouse, and that you understand the interrelationship between whether it's different business units or different product lines to advance the overall goals of the business and drive impact. And once you are able to articulate that and demonstrate partnership across those multiple cross functions, then you will be seen as somebody who can lead and can help drive forward and improve the business, and you will be a natural candidate to go forward.
Great advice. Yeah, that's awesome. We've had a couple of questions come out about, so actually a question that was in the chat group here. It was a longer one, but it was from Eva. I've been trying to pivot from tech support to product management for over a year. I finally able to pivot to a tech account manager role, but I'm not loving this role since it's still very much tech support. How can I get my company to give me a chance? I'm working on a master's in IT data analytics and have knowledge being in tech since 2005, but no companies will give me a chance as I've never held this role officially. Moving laterally is not an option for me. I just want to give up. I'm so drained in all these rejections. And there was a related question from Danielle, who was an associate product director. Have you ever considered leaving product, and why? What made you decide to stay? So there's kind of both questions in terms of how do I cross over, and what, any advice on how to persist and be resilient. Maybe Cynthia, you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure. So I mentor some women now, and in both of those cases, they're not in product today, but one of them is interested in product. So we've been having this discussion, and some of the things that I've suggested with her, certainly, she's got great education, like the question that's being asked, but sometimes it's hard to make your way into product, right? It just is. I think that something that's been very effective for me as a product person who's been hiring others, sometimes from other areas of the organization, is the people who really put their hand up to be a key stakeholder, an internal stakeholder that's interacting with product in some way. Mm-hmm. So for example, if I think about all of the data that we as product managers are gathering all of the time to better inform our strategies, it's coming from sales and support and all of the areas of the company. And oftentimes it's hard to get that information. And sometimes it's hard to get all of the information we want to get about our customers. If you're in a role currently like tech support, you can put your hand up, contact your product team, talk to your manager and say, is there a way I can either A, be a point of contact for a relationship with product, or is there a way I can help in gathering the data to provide to product to help make this relationship stronger? So that's something I recommend a lot. The other thing I often recommend is to really think about some of the vehicles that the product team may have that you may, put your hand up and say, I'd like to be a participant. So if you think about things like the customer advisory board, if I work in, say, tech support, sometimes an option is contact your product team and say, the next time you have a cab, would you mind if I just sat in the back and listened in? So beginning to really show your interest in wanting to get into that role, those types of things have worked really, really well. Roger, the question about have you ever considered leaving product is an interesting one for me, and because I did leave. So I'll share that. I considered leaving. I did it. And I did it many times over the last couple of decades. And I've done time, I call it time in other seats. Did some time in sales, time in marketing. I even ran a small company. And I don't think those are bad decisions for us as product managers. If I really, at the end of the day, my passion's in product, I couldn't be happier at this point in my life at Jamf. But I really think that a big piece of my job is balancing the needs of all of these stakeholders. So by leaving and coming back, I'm able to more effectively gather data from the other stakeholders. I'm better to position my communication, sometimes a little better than I was historically. And at the end of the day, I think we should be responsible for driving the whole product experience, not just creating the software. And I think all of that has made me a better PM professional. So I often say, if you have a chance to leave, sometimes it's not a bad thing, but come back.
Yeah, great perspective. Totally agree. And you learn the language. You also deeply learn the challenges that these other roles face, and you come back to the PM role with a much better perspective, right? That's a really good point. Well, I hope that advice is helpful in terms of, yeah, stepping up and just becoming more of an advocate for the customer to product management when you're in a customer support perspective. I think that's a great perspective, definitely. Let's see. We had a couple of questions about, well, where should I go when I'm looking for a new role in product management? So Rana asked, what platforms and sites would you recommend when looking for a new role in product management? Any suggestions there? I mean, Indeed is the obvious one, but do you have some other suggestions? Robyn?
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when in the past, I have tapped my network. So a lot of jobs are not public. There are a lot of, especially as you get higher and higher in your organization or in your career, a lot of the roles necessarily aren't established yet, or you're waiting for the right person to create the right role. So letting your network know that you're open to opportunities and asking if they know of any leads, if they'd be happy to introduce you to people in companies that you maybe don't know someone at, that's a very valid way to do it. The other one is LinkedIn. I mean, it's tried and true, and a lot of jobs are posted on LinkedIn. So I would add that one to the pile.
That's what I was going to say. Very similar to what Brandye said, is look on LinkedIn. Even if you've sourced the job elsewhere, look on LinkedIn, look for people that work there that might be a connection in your network. That's one thing that's really valuable about LinkedIn. I've coached a couple of folks that don't work in product, how to get into product or how to change roles in product. And that is a way that you can find, if a job is posted, do you have a connection there? Does someone you know well have a connection there that could maybe make an introduction that helps break the ice?
Yeah, good points. I'll also point out, and this is something that I've been advocating for at our company the last year, that you look for some more focused groups that maybe you can join. So for example, Women in Product Management is a great organization, and they have a job board. So that is a place to go. And it's also a place to build up your network, as Brandye was just talking about. So besides LinkedIn, there are great groups like Women in Product Management. I worked with somebody who wrote a blog for us last year who started Women in Black Product Management. So there's all these different groups that maybe you can join that will also give you exposure. And the flip side of that is I've encouraged our company to start looking at these other sites when we're looking for candidates. So because one of the challenges, the data that we had in our registration page pointed out that, it's 64% right now is the mix. And so one of the common complaints I hear is, well, yeah, we can't find more women candidates because they're just not out there. And I say, nah, wrong answer. We need to actually widen our pool of sources where we're looking for folks. And so we're starting to look at the Women in Product Management site and people who belong there as a source for potential candidates. People who are putting them up and saying, look, I'm looking for a career. So I think I would encourage folks who are looking that way to join these other affinity groups.
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to add to that. The Women in Product group is actually a great resource. It's mostly on Facebook for those who aren't aware of it. There is a lot of information there around how to break into product management, different types of product roles, definitions of product roles. So if you're new or looking to get into product management, or you're looking to advance in product management, I highly recommend it. There's just so much information in that group, and it's a very supportive community.
Right, definitely. I would also encourage you to join our LinkedIn group, the 280 group LinkedIn group for product managers. We have over, 35,000 members in that group, I believe it is. And so it's another great resource to tap as well. All right, so next question was right at the top. Lovely, I missed it earlier. She asked, should you get a product management certification in order to be in this role? Robyn?
I will take this one because I'm actually quite passionate about it. No, I don't need a project management certification. There's another question we saw. Do you need an MBA? No. What you need is a curiosity, a willingness to learn, and really good breadth of experience. And in my estimation, that's what makes the best product manager. People who are curious, always willing to learn, they ask questions, and they have done stints in a variety of roles. It's not a traditional engineer to product management to CTO. Like, that's not the career path. There are so many ways to learn about product management and get into product management. And a lot of it is actually doing the job and doing the work and talking to customers and understanding pain points. So product management certificates are certainly helpful. They help give you some structure, but it's not a prerequisite.
I will just add, it isn't a prerequisite, but I do think that it can help when it's a competitive market. And I would encourage it more for someone who's got, say, like in the 4 to 5 to 6 year level of experience, then it can be a differentiator where you have both a mix of some experience as well as that certification. Not a requirement, like Brandye said, but it can be something that helps you stand out from the crowd. Question that we had here, kind of related to what we were talking about earlier, but Michelle asks, I'm in the credit union space. We have PMs and POs, but the actual product management is missing from the organization. The title is really treated as a kitchen sink kind of role. Kind of funny, actually. We use the definition product janitor in our businesses, so similar there, right? What tips do you have to help build the discipline of PM within a company, especially when your direct manager has little to no PM knowledge or experience? And it seems like, Robyn, were you gonna chime in?
Oh, I was just gonna throw this one to Brandye because she worked in fintech for so long. I don't know if you have an answer.
Well, I mean, I worked in fintech where at the very beginning in banks and whatnot, product was not known as a thing. And then I think earlier in my career, I worked at Capital One where there weren't really product managers. There were acquisition managers and business analysts. And, you know, over time, I think the title and the role has been a little more well-defined. But in terms of how do you promote the product management discipline, I think what's important is to understand and be able to document and articulate what a product manager does, right? So throughout the entire product development lifecycle, from understanding users, pain points, identifying problem statements, going through solutioning, doing iterations, proofs of concept, doing the development, how to do all of that. And then don't forget the very important go to market, test, launch, beta, iterate, all of that, and being able to document all of those phases of the PDLC helps to demonstrate the value that a true product manager can bring to the organization. And when you can tie all of that back to business impact outcomes and data or metrics, whether it's top line revenue or bottom line operational savings, then people start to go, oh, that's what you do. Oh, that's so important. And being able to translate it both, like as I said earlier, on the business side and the technical side, then people go, oh, that's okay. Let's go over there. That's what we need.
Excellent point. Yeah. Nicole, if you don't mind helping me out, I think a link to our resources section where we talk about what is the role of product management might be a good place to start. There's lots of good resources out there, but that is a good place to go to get an understanding and have some good content to back up what Brandye was talking about, of demonstrating, well, how does PM help in the product lifecycle? So if you can pop that link into the chat group, that'd be awesome. I forgot that I also wanted to ask people to actually ask their questions live. So I'd like to ask Mary Mills, if you're comfortable, if you could unmute and ask your question, because it was one that I hadn't anticipated. Are you still with us, Mary?
Yes.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Could you ask your question, please?
Sure. So I was just asking about having conflicts with other women. I experienced where a woman, you know, we were equal at one point, but she got promoted. And then I felt the need to tell her, you know, I'm looking to advance my career as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I was just hoping we could agree as women. I mean, you know, that we could try to help each other because we know, you know, women are underrepresented. And it just seemed like she turned on me, like that was the wrong thing to say. And so I guess, was it the wrong thing to say? Or, you know, or is it just, that's the way it is sometimes? Sometimes women aren't necessarily allies. I just want to know, you have any experience with that or have advice, I guess?
Great. Well, thanks for the question, Mary.
Sure, I can jump in there, Mary. So it's interesting, right? Because I think as women, we default to think that all other women will help us, right? And I think it's one of the things as I'm getting later in my career, I just feel like a lot of people have helped me over the years and I want to pay it forward. And I do want to pay it forward to women and I'm committed to that. But if I look back at my own career, it's kind of interesting. And I look at the people that did help me. I think I was looking for women all the time, and I was ignoring men as an option to help me. And if I really look back and analyze it, some of the best help I had was from men. And I think because they've almost gone before us, right? In that they've navigated some of the things that we are now navigating and getting to navigate in mass. And I couldn't be more excited about that. But I think sometimes tapping into men as mentors is a very rich source, and that can be very, very beneficial. So that's one thing that I've found helped me. I don't know if that's helpful, Mary, but it's worth looking at maybe.
Did the other panelists want to chime in? I have a thought too, but yeah, Brandye?
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. I can completely empathize. I had almost the exact same situation happen to me at one point in my career. And much like Cynthia, a lot of my mentors and sponsors were male, partially because that was the leadership in fintech. Those who are in fintech know that. But it was actually very disheartening to me. And it was probably the first time I realized, to what Cynthia was saying, not all women are open to or able to or going to support other women. And once you realize that, then you know that you should be seeking out the women who do want to pay it forward, that do want to bring you up and help mentor. As to why some women are like this and others aren't, I don't know. I think there is a lot of pressure that every woman feels as they achieve higher and higher levels to keep it. I do think it's harder for us to keep our seat at the table. And so there is some stress. So sometimes it's just allowing for the grace. That individual that you reached out to maybe just couldn't handle keeping her new position and helping others right then. I don't think it was the wrong thing to ask or to reach out to, but just know sometimes there are people that are more willing and more able in their own space to help you out. So like Cynthia said, see who else is out there.
Right, I agree. And I just wanted to point out, people are people, male or female, and some may just not be in the place in their personality or their career or their time where they're not able to help, right? So, but I do think be open to a mentor of either gender and be able to ask for it. And that actually, there were two questions. One was from Alice, how and where can you find a female mentor when working in a male-dominated place? And then we also asked for, Anusha had asked, looking for mentors to grow in PM leadership. So just more generally, how do you find a mentor and how do you make that a constructive relationship and in both directions? I want to add that in there. Who would like to help out our audience in finding mentors? Everybody. All right, Robyn, we haven't heard from you for a while. How about you?
Okay. I just wanted to call out some of the groups that we mentioned earlier, right? I've found amazing mentors within those environments. I think it's a good place to start if you're looking for female mentorship, someone that can empathize and has lived some of the same experiences. But yeah, just be open within your organization. Look for people that that you may be able to help as well, right? That may be looking for mentorship. I have had such enriching experiences mentoring men and women who worked within product or outside of product, who were just curious about the role, and wanted to learn more and wanted to hear about some of the stuff that we do. So that's been very rewarding for me. And yeah, you gotta find allies where they are, accomplices, advocates, and not everybody is going to be in the headspace for that. It's a very complicated element of our culture that I don't think we have time for today. But it's there, so be aware.
Great, thank you, Robyn. Cynthia, you want to add something?
One of the other things I would say, I think, is I'm very fortunate today. I work at a company that has an employee resource group focused at women at Jamf. I also have I think, benefit of being in a company where we have mentorship programs for women. So I think if your company already doesn't have those things, I think that's a good question to ask, right? Your company, your HR department, is this an option for us? And I think if you're job hunting, I think it's a good question to ask in your interview.
That's excellent. I want to point out a couple of resources that were brought up in the chat group. Peg Burr pointed out there's a group called Advancing Women in Product. So check that group out. Jenna Ware mentioned there's Women in Travel Tech. So there can be very specialized areas available that may be able to help, groups, excuse me, that should be able to help. So check out those, and there may be a group out there that you're not even aware of in your particular industry. Another great question or area of questions that we had was around stakeholder relationships. So I want to get into a few of those questions as well. And the first one that Vanessa had asked was, how do you find the balance between being assertive and being too assertive? I feel like I can never win. Brandye, you want to help us kick off that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think without a little bit more information, it's hard to know what is meant by too assertive. I do find that sometimes assertive is used as a word to indicate other things. Like if somebody wants to call you perhaps opinionated or stubborn, they'll say, oh, they're too assertive. So one, cognizant of, is too assertive really what it is, or are they trying to tell you something else? The other thing is that I would find when you are trying to ensure that your point is clear and that you are passionate about your point, that you remove the emotion from it and you really stick to the facts or the data to help influence the conversation.
Yep, fantastic. I'd like to encourage someone to maybe ask a question live. Michelle asked for the panel a question. Michelle, could you unmute and ask your question? Michelle McBride?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Michelle McBride, Senior Product Manager. So my question was to the panel, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to female product managers, what would those top 3 be? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. All right, pieces of advice. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in here, Roger. I think pieces of advice for me, I think using data. I loved when Brandye said that. I think that's been one of my best weapons in terms of advancing my career. Really using data to advocate for yourself, to do all kinds of things. I think that's really works well. I think communication, I call it the PM superpower. So I think you can't over communicate, and the better you are as a communicator, I think the returns will be there for you in a variety of ways, and visibility, influence, all those types of things. So I'll start with 2, and I'll turn over to Brandye and Robyn.
All right, so
Go ahead.
I don't know if I have 3, so I'm going to at least start with one here. One of the most important attributes that I look for when I'm hiring product managers and when I'm developing my team is the ability to succinctly tell a story, to take your stakeholders, whether that's engineers or account managers or BD or even your leadership, through what it is you want to achieve, why it's important, how you're going to get there, and the timeline. And being able to do that in a very succinct manner with the right amount of detail given the audience is going to set you apart and is going to raise you up so that you are the one that's tasked to go and present in front of the CEO or the chief product officer, whatever it may be you present to the board. Those are really great opportunities. And the more that you can practice your presentation, presence, and communication skills and tailoring your communication to your audience, the better product manager you will be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the storytelling. And I think that leads into just building relationships. What Cynthia and Brandye both said, it is so critical in the role that we have. We are managing so many different stakeholders. We're driving a lot of projects without necessarily authority. We're leading by influencing. So build relationships, find out who your stakeholders are, build and nurture those relationships. And the other part of that is we are passionate about solving problems. I don't think any of us would last long in this career if that wasn't something that just keeps us up at night. We have to solve problems. So there are problems that you are solving with your product. There are also problems in your organization. So without becoming everybody's therapist, figure out with your stakeholders, what are the problems that they're having in their organization that are maybe related to your product? Is there something that is frustrating for them on the support side? Is there something that's really difficult on the sales side? Whoever you're talking to, is there some problem that could potentially be solved? that might not otherwise bump up to the top of the list, but something you can consider and you really think about, because that's what we gather data. So building relationships, solving problems. That wasn't 3, but I think between the 3 of us, we got maybe 5 or 6.
More than 3. Right, absolutely. So I think that's great advice. And I just want to emphasize and echo a little bit of what all of you said. It is the best combination when you bring the data, and that's a few facts, and then you can weave that into a story. And when you have the data, the story is what brings the emotions out, brings the passion out to solve problems like Robyn was talking about, and gets the whole team excited, right? When you can say, look, we heard from 3 customers that if we could just solve this problem for them, they would be eternally grateful. And there's data to back up that this is not just a problem from those 3, but from a ton of our customers from our survey. Now you're cooking with gas. You've got the full recipe for success as a product manager, male or female. Again, this is equally invaluable advice, but I think that you can tell a great story when you've got all that data and pull it all together. And then the last thing that Robyn was talking about, and then talk about how that story weaves in with all of the other issues that various departments have, and solving this issue can help that department be more effective, right? Or have fewer headaches, right? Especially if you're in a customer support situation. So great advice. Man, there's so many questions here. Namita Jane asked an interesting one. Sorry, my bad. Namita, could you unmute, maybe ask your question, please?
Yes, sure. Hi, thanks for having me and thanks for organizing this. So I was posing a question privately to Roger, but I can say it out loud here. The question being about the transition from somebody from engineering space to product management space, which is I am right now. I've been in the engineering and software management space for 12 plus years in the past, and now in product space for 4 plus years. But the challenge is that, does it mean that this transition entails that somebody would start from the lowest profile in the product space? So being a software engineer for 12 years, now moving into product, it was very hard to find roles at a mid to senior level. And I ended up being an associate product manager to begin with. But, you know, is that common, or basically does the experience in the engineering space undermines everything when we switch to product?
Great question, Amita. Thank you for asking that.
I'll take that. I would say, and this is not going to be a very heartwarming answer, but I'd say it really depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on the space in which you're in. So some products are incredibly technical, and the value that an engineering background can bring will catapult you into a more senior position in a technical product. In something that's more B2C focused or not as technical, then having an engineering background is great foundationally, but what that team may need and may want you to develop is more business understanding, customer empathy, more of the front end UX skills. And so it's really understanding what the product scope is that you're looking to move into, and how do the skills and the people operating in that space today, what do they bring to the table? And are you missing something that maybe you need to lean into? But if you want to move from software engineering into product, look for things that are an easier path. So like I said, technical products, that is an easier transition to go straight from software engineering to a technical product, and then you can become a core front-end product manager and product leader. But I wouldn't say it undermines at all what you do and how you move. It really depends on what the product is that you're working on.
Okay, great. And would there be any resources or tips to then now move further into product growth roles? So from being an associate product manager to being a product manager or senior product manager. Yes, the experience in the product space would count, but what else can I be learning or doing on the side to prepare myself?
Right. So similar to the areas I mentioned, right? Developing customer empathy, understanding UX design principles, some of those other areas of product management and aspects of product management. If you don't feel comfortable operating in those spaces, then lean into learning more about them, whether learning about it from the people in your organization today, or through some social groups, affinity groups, or even this is where product management certificates or product management programs. There's online courses, there's all sorts of opportunities to learn about different areas of product design, product management, customer empathy, developing problem statements, all of that. There are so many resources. So figure out where you feel you need to invest more and go seek out the opportunities to learn that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great advice,
Yeah.
Brandye. Go ahead, Robyn.
Oh, I just had one thing to add. I think this is very true for coming from an engineering background, but really regardless of what your background is, there are so many skills that a product manager needs because what we do is so broad. Figure out what skills you have that you're really good at so you can lean into that and lead with that. And then to Brandye's point, figure out where your gaps are. Look at frameworks. We've got a bunch of tools on our website you can look at. Figure out, we have a skills assessment you can take. There's a lot of things that you can do that can help you figure out, okay, this is where I'm really strong. This is where I have gaps. Let me fill my gaps, but then lead with my strengths. And I started out as a high school drama teacher, you guys. You can come from anywhere, I promise you. I'm a testament. But we talked about storytelling. That's something that I can lead with, right? So figure out what your strengths are. This is a crazy job that we all love. And there's a reason why we came to it and why we love it so much. And just play to your strengths.
That's a great point, Robyn. I was going to say the same thing in terms of the skills assessment. I like what you said better, though. Lead with your strengths, but then take the skills assessment, which is free. And maybe, Nicole, you can paste that link into the chat group and then see where are some weaknesses. And not only what are maybe your particular weaknesses, but for the role that you're in. Brandye made that good point. The role that you're in, what is going to be most important, and then that help the crossing over of where maybe you're weak and the role that you're in, what's important to that role. That's where maybe you want to focus your offline learning, going online learning and out of the office work, but online learning to do more. We have only a few more minutes. I want to get to another question. This is an important one, I thought, from Shelley, who was in financial services, actually, as a director of product. Do you believe that mothers can truly have an executive role and be present with their kids? Do you think society agrees? And Robyn, I think you might want to kick us off on this one.
This one always amazes me because we, as a culture, we always seem to ask this question about mothers, but often neglect to ask it about fathers. Because fathers have families too, and it's important. I'm particularly fortunate enough to not only work in product management, but my husband also works in product management. And we have had to kind of figure out that balance. And it's a juggling act, but an equal one. And I think managing society's expectations around what you should do is a huge burden. And I don't think we can lift that one individually, but we can collectively to break down those stereotypes, ask the questions about fathers, be advocates for fathers. Sometimes I think, we ask, what is an advantage? Sometimes it can be easier to get time off and so forth as a woman because of that expectation, and men need that too. So I think it's really important, it's talking about breaking down stereotypes, advocate for yourself, advocate for the balance you need, and let's do this together.
Totally agree. And as a father of 4, my wife and I definitely split the roles up, and she's a working professional as well, and the two of us definitely split things. There was the first 6 years of our child rearing years, she worked weekends, so I was completely on with the kids during those weekends and cooking dinner and doing all the things that needed to be done to keep young kids active and energized and not tearing the house apart. So yes, find those relationships. I love there was a reference to RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, fantastic point. Advocate for both partners to have this role so that both partners can be equally successful at home as well as in the workplace. All right, let's see if there's one more question we can sneak in here. Did I miss any questions, Nicole, that we should bring up? Because I've been kind of scrolling back and forth. Oh, here was one. The pandemic has been especially hard on working moms. What tips do you have to succeed at work while doing more at home?
I'll take this one. I am a working mother. I have 2 school-aged children. And I did start a new job during the pandemic, which is always one of those sort of overwhelming, not sure how that's all going to land. But what I will say has been super helpful is just being organized, taking a couple minutes at the beginning of each week to sit down with my husband. So talking about advocating, right? Looking at the calendar, actually articulating all of that hidden work that women traditionally take on, right? Scheduling doctor's appointments, understanding the soccer practice schedule, knowing which kids in which Zoom class at what time with what instrument, all of that. But actually bringing your partner into that conversation to say, hey, okay, here's what I can do. What can you do? Assume that they're going to take on part of it. And I mean, it's super helpful. I also, and this is just my own personal tip or trick for the last year or so, I have been doing meal planning on Sundays. It takes me 10 minutes. I make sure that I use up whatever's in the fridge, but then I don't have to worry at the end of the day, did I take anything out for dinner? What am I going to cook? I am the primary cook in my family because I like it. But I found that has been super helpful. And now I've got a year's worth of week plans that I can just go back and go, oh, right, I remember I made that. It was good. But it used to be my drive time home at the end of the day was when I would plan what was for dinner. And now it's a 10-foot commute. So I find doing that on Sundays has really helped. So I advocate for a little bit of organization up front. Will save you a lot of time and heartache in the end. The other piece of advice I would have is draw those boundaries. When you shut your laptop at the end of the day, shut it down. Be present for your family and your children, and be present at work when you're at work as much as you can. We're all living at work right now. But the firmer you draw those boundaries, the more you will respect yourself, and people will respect you for having those clear boundaries.
Great advice. And working with your partner to get a plan together as a coordinated effort. Great advice. Love it. Well, we're at the hour, and I very much want to thank Brandye Sweetnam, Cynthia Williamson, Robyn Brooks. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a great, lively conversation, and lots of questions were answered. If you have further questions, please let us know. As always, go to 280group.com. Lots of free resources, as well as online educational resources to help you advance in your career as a product manager. Join our LinkedIn group, join other LinkedIn groups, build a network, and get some help finding mentors and allies. Thanks so much for joining us today. Have a great one.